In the year 2077, a nuclear Armageddon obliterated the global population in an event known as the Great War. While the United States population was decimated, a shadowy organization of the nation's highest-ranking government officials had set in motion their plan to not only survive the apocalypse, but to thrive in its wake, using their combined resources to build hidden bases across the country that would allow them to carry out kidnappings, experiments, and a global genocide, all with the goal of achieving total domination and rebuilding America in their own image. This is the story of the Enclave. In the Fallout series, the Enclave is a secretive faction composed of the remnants of the United States government, believing that once they purged the world of all so-called mutants, that they would rebuild their once great nation under a new order, all with the goal of achieving total domination over the wasteland. But to fully grasp the history of the Enclave, you have to understand their origins. Before the war, the Enclave was involved in many of the deepest conspiracies of the federal government, consisting of the United States' most powerful and influential figures, such as the president, congressmen, acclaimed scientists, military officials, wealthy industrialists, and other prominent individuals, who all considered themselves to be the pinnacle of American intellect and power. With their combined resources, the Enclave funded extensive conspiracies aimed at ensuring their survival. In 2054, the Enclave would initiate an experiment known as Project Safehouse. In collaboration with Vault-Tec, the Enclave would commission the construction of 122 underground nuclear shelters known as vaults, which conducted a series of inhumane and unorthodox experiments on the United States population. Tim Kaine, creator of the Fallout series, has suggested that originally these vaults were commissioned to gather data for the Enclave to colonize another planet, although this remains unverified within the game's canon. As the resource wars escalated and nuclear tensions rose, Enclave members would begin to build secret nuclear shelters across the country, financed by embezzled government funds as well as corporate investors such as Poseidon Energy and Vault-Tec. These bases were constructed with the intention of sustaining Enclave operations, even if the United States were to fall. In 2073, the Enclave, in collaboration with Poseidon Oil, constructed the presidential oil rig off the coast of San Francisco in order to house the president, his cabinet, and other essential Enclave personnel. Furthermore, other facilities like the White Springs Congressional Bunker, Raven Rock, and the California Research Colony were built to safeguard the members of the Enclave and provide them with the resources necessary to further their goals in the post-apocalypse. As the Great War approached, their actions began to draw the attention of the public, nearly exposing the Enclave conspiracy before the impending Armageddon. One of the Enclave's earliest projects was the development of their now iconic plasma weapons, which began in 2063 with the creation of the MPLX Nova Surge prototype reverse-engineered from alien technology. Little did they know that this would attract the attention of a group of alien conspiracy theorists known as Quaere Virum. Once the group got word of this technology's existence, the members of Quaere Virum infiltrated an Enclave facility and stole the MPLX prototype. Their goal was clear: to expose the existence of extraterrestrials as well as the government's weaponization of alien technology. However, their plan met a swift end when Enclave operatives hunted down and eliminated the members of Quaere Virum before they could expose the conspiracy to the public. This was just one of the instances where the Enclave's secrecy was nearly compromised, as in June of 2077, the previously mentioned White Springs Bunker in Appalachia was being funded with embezzled funds from the Department of Agriculture under Secretary Thomas Eckhart, a member of the Enclave. This caught the attention of Appalachia Senator Sam Blackwell, who had earned himself a reputation for being somewhat of a muckraker, routinely pointing out corruption within the United States government. It was around this time that he began investigating the series of unusual investments made by the Secretary of Agriculture. However, his hunt for the truth led to threats being made against his daughter, which ultimately forced him to end the investigation and disappear into hiding. Months later, Blackwell would go on record in an interview with the Charleston Herald where he stated, quote, "There are sinister forces at work in the halls of government. I simply could not be a part of that anymore." This statement sparked rumors of a deep state conspiracy, but soon the public would discover the truth when, on October 18, 2077, the Boston Bugle would release an investigative report that raised the curtain on the existence of the Enclave. The article revealed that the president and his cabinet had not been to the White House in months. The initial assumption was that the president and his cabinet had moved operations to Raven Rock, but further investigations revealed that they had not been to Raven Rock in over a year. So, the question remained, where was the president? Through an extensive investigation, the Bugle revealed that the president had been running the country from a Poseidon Energy oil rig 175 miles off the coast of California. On top of all that, the anonymous sources that the Bugle had cited revealed that this rig had an official designation, Control Station Enclave. This revelation would prove the rumors that a deep state shadow government did indeed exist, and would take control of the United States in the event of a nuclear war. After this article was released, the public would eagerly await the president's response, who met these allegations with silence. Just 5 days later, on October 23, 2077, nuclear fire engulfed the country, and in the span of merely 2 hours, the Great War obliterated the United States. When the Great War came, all Enclave personnel retreated to their designated bases. While some managed to gain entry, others were not as fortunate, as only members of the Enclave were permitted inside their nuclear shelters. Government officials who attempted to enter without membership were killed on sight. And when the bombs finally dropped, the Enclave would activate all of their facilities with their members inside. After years of meticulous plotting, they had survived Armageddon. And it is at this point in the timeline where the story of the Enclave truly begins. As nuclear sirens filled Appalachia, authorized government officials would flee to the White Springs Congressional Bunker, which they had funded to ensure their safety. After the bunker was sealed and all non-members were executed, the Enclave could begin their mission in Appalachia, with the Secretary of the Treasury being the highest-ranking Enclave member to make it to the facility. The White Springs Congressional Bunker was originally intended to be the base of operations for the Enclave, with the facility being controlled by an AI supercomputer known as MODIS, while also having access to the Kovac-Muldoon satellite system designed to monitor the region of Appalachia. However, when the bunker first activated, its personnel were horrified to discover that the bombs had severed their communications with the rest of the Enclave facilities, such as Raven Rock and the oil rig. With their communication systems down, they had no idea what had happened to the rest of the Enclave, or if anyone had even survived. Not only that, but the Secretary of the Treasury, who served as the de facto leader of the bunker, would almost immediately die from radiation poisoning under mysterious circumstances. Following the death of the Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas Eckhart, was next in line for command of the White Springs bunker. This would lead to him being declared the new President of the United States, unaware that the real president had escaped to the Poseidon oil rig on the west coast. With no communication with the rest of the Enclave, there was no one opposed to him assuming the presidency. His goal as president was clear. Instead of seeking to restore government control as the Enclave initially planned, he aimed to eradicate communism by using the nuclear silos in the area to launch atomic missiles on China. When he proposed his ideas to the rest of the bunker, some were skeptical, as it seemed pointless to continue waging a war that had already concluded. This would lead Eckhart to seal those who did not agree with him into a room and had the bunker's AI, MODIS, fill it with toxic gas, eliminating any opposition to his plan. As president, he had almost full control of the bunker, its personnel, as well as the MODIS AI system. However, his staff was limited to 48 people after purging those who opposed his plans. This was a problem, as not only did he need more soldiers for his Enclave to survive, but he also had only one general left under his command. General Harper was the only person authorized to activate DEFCON 1, which would launch the nuclear missiles. Therefore, Eckhart ensured that Harper would not be permitted to leave the bunker for his own safety. With the general put in charge of Eckhart's war plan, Enclave scouts were sent out into Appalachia to search for potential recruits. In June of 2079, Eckhart's men found a secret Chinese facility hidden underground which contained robotic drones known as Liberators, which he would have reprogrammed under Enclave control. They would also discover an abandoned West Tech facility where they found the remains of experiments with the forced evolutionary virus, which Eckhart's men acquired for further research. This video is sponsored by War Thunder. War Thunder is the most comprehensible vehicle combat game ever made, and is now available for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox by using my link in the description of this video. Take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships of 10 major nations, ranging from biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. Immerse yourself in the intense combat of War Thunder, where incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time. With an unmatched wealth of high-quality content to discover, there's simply no game better suited for fans of military history. And as a history major, I truly appreciate the authenticity and historical accuracy of the vehicles in the game. The developers' dedication to these details demonstrates their commitment to creating an immersive and realistic experience. War Thunder offers 3 distinct modes. Arcade suits those craving fast-paced matches with enhanced vehicle performance and simplified physics. Realistic mode, the perfect middle ground, strikes a balance between intensity and authenticity, while simulator mode ditches all guardrails for the ultimate challenge. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms. That includes 100,000 Silver Lions, multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive Vehicle Decorator, Eagle of Valor, and a premium account for the first 7 days of playing. This incredible offer is only available for a limited time, so be quick and join a worldwide community of over 70 million players in epic PvP battles today, and delve into the breathtaking experience that is War Thunder. This branch of the Enclave would continue to work alone until they were discovered by Colonel Ellen Santiago and her group of soldiers in late 2081, who had traveled all the way from DC to Appalachia following rumors of the existence of the White Springs bunker. Eckhart was happy to have more soldiers at his disposal and accepted them into their ranks. However, over the next couple of years, Eckhart would begin to lose the confidence of his soldiers as he became increasingly erratic and reckless. In January 2082, after an Enclave scientist reported that a lab failure resulted in the escape of a scorched beast, Eckhart ordered the scientist to create more of the creatures, despite him being advised against it. In October of 2082, he had a heated dispute with Colonel Santiago after ordering her men to withdraw from the field while they were searching for a sergeant's wife. Their situation deteriorated further when General Harper would die of radiation poisoning, derailing Eckhart's plan for nuclear retaliation against China. He would salvage the situation in November, when he would send Colonel Santiago to Camp McClintock, where she was promoted to general by exploiting the location's automated promotion system. Although successful, she felt it was dishonorable to manipulate a machine to obtain the rank of general. Despite her feelings, Eckhart now had a general under his command, granting him access to Appalachia's nuclear silos and delegating the task of obtaining nuclear launch codes to Santiago and her team. In March of 2083, Eckhart would discover that his longtime political rival who almost exposed the Enclave, Senator Sam Blackwell, was still alive and had killed one of his men. The senator was considered a threat to Enclave security due to the fact that he was in possession of a US Senate ID, which granted him access to the White Springs bunker. Eckhart would issue a kill order against Blackwell and sent Enclave agent Gray into Appalachia to track him down. Gray would corner Blackwell inside of his personal bunker and succeed in putting him down. Months would pass, and in June, Eckhart's plan was nearing completion, but there was a problem. Appalachia's nuclear silos were automated and required a high enough threat level in order to activate DEFCON 1 and launch the atomic bombs. To fix this problem, Eckhart would order General Santiago to release the Liberator robots, super mutants, and scorch beasts onto Appalachia in order to convince the system that the United States was being invaded. Santiago would refuse this order, believing that this plan was going too far, prompting Eckhart to inject her with a serum which placed her in a medically induced coma so that she couldn't thwart his plan. With no one left to stand in his way, Eckhart unleashed the Scorch Beasts, Super Mutants, and Liberators onto Appalachia, which would slowly begin to increase the nuclear system's perceived threat level towards DEFCON 1. However, his plans would ultimately be foiled when in February of 2085, a group of Enclave soldiers betrayed Eckhart, freeing Santiago from captivity and successfully reviving her. This would lead to the Appalachian Enclave being split into two groups, Eckhart's loyalists and Santiago's rebels. The two factions would open fire on each other throughout the bunker, and eventually Santiago would order her soldiers to destroy the Modus AI with explosive charges, as it was still under the control of Eckhart. When the explosives were triggered, it destroyed a large portion of Modus's memory, causing it to go haywire and filling the bunker with a deadly toxin that suffocated everyone inside, including Eckhart, putting an end to the Appalachian Enclave. After the bunker's personnel had perished, Modus dedicated itself to restoring the facility back to full functionality, awaiting the day that someone would arrive to help re-establish the Enclave in Appalachia. While the Appalachian Enclave met a grueling demise only 8 years after the Great War, over 2,800 miles west, the rest of the Enclave thrived on the presidential oil rig in the Pacific. For over 60 years after the Great War, the Enclave maintained their own version of the United States government. This West Coast branch of the Enclave believed that they were the last bastion of humanity left on Earth. And if you were not born into the Enclave, you were either killed, experimented on, or used for slave labor, with their ultimate goal being to wipe out any and all non-Enclave survivors in the wasteland, because to them, if you weren't with them, then you were nothing more than a mutant. The Enclave maintained a strict hierarchy, consisting of the executive branch, which included a president and vice president. The president in particular had unlimited power due to the Enclave neglecting to create a judicial branch. There was, however, a legislative branch, which included a number of congressmen and women who presumably are responsible for the creation of laws and policies that govern the Enclave. The Enclave's military structure was reformed from the remnants of the old United States military, consolidating all branches under the Department of the Army, most likely due to the other branches diminishing in size after the Great War. Their military included a general, as well as joint chiefs of staff who make up the Army High Command. The Army made up the bulk of the Enclaved armed forces, and its soldiers were equipped with a variety of assault, laser, and plasma weapons, and were equipped with advanced combat armor as well as advanced power armor. Then, there was the Enclave Air Force, which utilized ex-VB-02 vertibirds, able to transport Enclave infantry into battle, while also providing aerial support if needed. The Enclave Navy was a small branch, which comprised of a few pre-war battleships stationed at the oil rig. The Secret Service would be tasked with protecting the president just as they did in the pre-war United States. They would also be deployed on delicate missions in the wasteland, which usually involved the assassination of anyone who stood in the way of Enclave operations. Aside from the military, executive, and judicial branches, there was also an array of different divisions within the Enclave, such as the R&D Department, the Chemical Corps, the Atomic Energy Commission, and funnily enough, a Peacekeeping and Reconnaissance Department. The Enclave would consolidate all gathered information through a system called EnclaveNet, which was their primary system for communication and information storage. With all these preparations in place, when the Great War ended, the Enclave ran like clockwork. About a century later, a new president known only as Richardson Sr. was voted in to be the President of the United States. During his presidency, he mandated an increase in the development of Enclave technology, which included the Mark I advanced power armor, which evolved from the pre-war X-01 design. As the Enclave advanced in technology, President Richardson would train his son, Dick Richardson, in the art of persuasion, which would eventually get Dick elected to Congress around 2215, and 5 years later, with the help of Richardson Sr.'s political influence, Dick would be elected president, taking over his father's role in 2220. As president, he would continue the Enclave's plans to exterminate the population of the wasteland and establish their version of the United States, with many of his policies being simply extensions of his father's. By the year 2235, the Enclave would begin experimenting on captive death claws with the goal of creating expendable shock troops for their operations. In the following year, the Enclave would make a discovery which would set in motion their plans for world domination when they discovered the ruins of the Mariposa military base on July 20th, 2236. According to their records, this was the site where the United States government had begun to experiment with FEV in order to create super soldiers for the United States Army. However, the base was in ruins, as it had previously been set to self-destruct by a certain individual from Vault 13 years before. After making this discovery, the Enclave would send their chemical corps to scour the base, while assault squads were sent into the wasteland to gather slaves to use for excavation. One of these slaves was a man named Melchior, who was captured from the town of Reading. Keep him in mind because he'll become important later. As the excavations went on, the slaves would slowly begin to feel the effects of the FEV chemicals in the base, as they began to change into super mutants the longer they stayed in Mariposa. Among those affected by the FEV was an Enclave soldier named Frank Horrigan. Frank was described as a huge brick of a man, and previously served as the president's bodyguard until an undocumented psychotic blunder would see him reassigned to Mariposa. During his time there, he would begin to feel the effects of the FEV as he was turning into a super mutant. But instead of being executed, he was sent back to the Enclave oil rig to be experimented on. Meanwhile, Melchior, aware that he and the other slaves would be executed once the excavation was completed, began stashing weapons with his comrades in order to have a chance at freedom once the Enclave had no further use for them. Ultimately, in 2237, the Enclave was able to extract a pure sample of FEV from the ruins of Mariposa, and thus had no more need for the slaves. But when they went to execute them, the slaves rebelled, killing a good number of Enclave personnel in the process. The soldiers retreated from the base, sustaining heavy casualties, but before fleeing, they utilized explosives to seal the entrance of Mariposa, trapping the mutants inside. With a pure sample of FEV in their possession, the Enclave utilized it to conduct a series of sinister experiments. The captured Deathclaws would be among the first subjects exposed to the FEV by the Enclave, granting them advanced intelligence as well as the ability to talk with varying degrees of articulation. Another subject of the FEV was Frank Horrigan, who would be forced to undergo relentless experiments by Enclave scientists, furthering his transformation into a super mutant. Under the supervision of Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling, Horrigan would be used as a guinea pig for experiments involving modified strands of FEV, with somewhat successful results. Frank would endure this suffering for over 2 years, and during that time he was kept heavily sedated, only allowed brief periods of consciousness during which several violent incidents occurred. Frank would become a quote, genetically engineered freak and would be seen as such by even his own comrades, as his DNA had undergone such drastic changes that he had become a unique mutant, only being kept alive by machines. And when the tests ran dry in January of 2239, the Enclave decided that he was too much of an asset to be discarded. As a result, Frank was brainwashed, outfitted with a custom suit of power armor tailored to his immense size, and deployed back into the field as a member of the Secret Service, becoming the boogeyman of the wasteland. While the Enclave succeeded in creating incredibly powerful soldiers out of Frank Horrigan and the intelligent Deathclaws, their ultimate goal when they excavated Mariposa was to use the FEV to create a biological virus capable of exterminating billions worldwide. With the Enclave's ultimate goal, as previously mentioned, being to exterminate all of mankind apart from themselves. The virus would begin development under Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling, who would send out Enclave soldiers to collect various chemicals required for the development of the virus. In early 2241, the Enclave would make contact with the Salvatore crime family in New Reno, and offered them laser weapons in exchange for chemicals crucial to the development of the virus. While the Enclave usually only operated behind the scenes, they pursued this course of action because, ultimately, it wouldn't matter, because the Salvatores as well as the rest of the population would be dead after their bioweapon was created and released. Later that year, the virus, now known by the designation FEV Curling 13, would be near completion, with Dr. Curling needing to conduct one final experiment before releasing it onto the population. This experiment involved conducting evaluations on 2 test groups, one free of radiation and the other exposed to it. In order to acquire these subjects, the Enclave would first send an all-clear signal to Vault 13, and on May 16, 2242, the vault was opened, and 2 Enclave assault squads immediately opened fire, killing 3 dwellers on the spot before storming the vault. The surviving residents were rounded up and taken back to the oil rig. Following this, the previously mentioned intelligent death claws would trick their Enclave masters into believing that they were a failed experiment, discarding them inside the now abandoned Vault 13. 2 months later, another Enclave assault squad was dispatched to the village of Arroyo in the California mountains, where they captured the tribals and transported them to the oil rig. With the 2 test groups captured, the Enclave would subject the Vault dwellers, as well as the Arroyo tribals, to FEV Curling 13. While this was all happening, the intelligent Deathclaws had made Vault 13 their new home, and this would prompt the Enclave to dispatch Frank Horrigan and a squad of soldiers to exterminate them once and for all. Back at the oil rig, the initial tests for FEV Curling 13 showed an estimated 99.5% fatality rate. The villagers from Arroyo died within an hour of exposure, while the subjects from Vault 13 perished on average 14.5 hours after exposure. With promising results, the Enclave projected that they could produce 250,000 gallons within 6 weeks' time, releasing the FEV Curling 13 into the atmosphere through jet streams and creating a vaccine to immunize themselves from the virus's effects. Everything was going according to plan until the oil rig was infiltrated by the Chosen One, who had come to free his people. During his infiltration, the Chosen One managed to assassinate President Dick Richardson, as well as causing a meltdown in the oil rig's reactor. But before he could make his escape, the Chosen One came face to face with Frank Horrigan.
You've gotten a lot farther than you should have, but then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either. Your ride's over, Muty. Time to die.
By some miracle, the Chosen One managed to defeat Horrigan before leaving the oil rig with the Vault 13 residents and the villagers of Arroyo. As the Chosen One set sail back to the mainland, the meltdown in the oil rig's reactor caused a massive explosion, destroying the Enclave's headquarters and killing everyone inside. The loss of their headquarters dealt a devastating blow to the Enclave, and this catalyst event plunged them into a downward spiral, marking the beginning of the end for the Enclave. After the oil rig was obliterated, those who were not stationed there when it was destroyed fled to Camp Navarro in New California, where the remaining members of the Enclave sought refuge. The Enclave would manage to keep Navarro operational until 2242, when their senior scientist, a man named Autumn, received a signal from someone named John Henry Eden. Claiming to be the new president of the United States, Eden ordered all remaining Enclave members to assemble at Raven Rock in Washington, D.C. Few soldiers opted to hold position at Camp Navarro, and the ones that did were dealt with by the NCR during the sacking of Navarro. Meanwhile, in the east, the rest of the Enclave personnel would arrive at Raven Rock. Upon his arrival, Autumn was summoned for a meeting with John Henry Eden, and to his surprise, he discovered that the president was actually a Zax AI supercomputer programmed to govern the United States in the event of a national catastrophe. Eden was loaded with data about American history, and his personality was based on an amalgamation of every single president in the nation's history. Autumn kept Eden's true identity a secret from the rest of the Enclave, but passed on the knowledge to his son, Augustus Autumn, before passing away. Augustus would later rise to the rank of colonel and lead the Enclave's military. Over the years, the Enclave would re-establish itself at Raven Rock and the Adams Air Force Base, utilizing their resources such as manufacturing facilities, weapons stockpiles, and a massive mobile-based crawler. With these resources at their disposal, they developed new and advanced technologies, such as the Black Devil and Hellfire power armor, originally prototypes from before the destruction of the oil rig, now fully manufactured for the Enclave soldiers to use. Additionally, the Enclave began a project at the Adams Air Force Base to create an enhanced line of Duraframe iBots. Although this project was ultimately abandoned, with only one unit named Eddie avoiding being scrapped. This new East Coast Enclave under Colonel Autumn had abandoned their previous plans for genocide and instead focused on consolidating their power in order to become the dominant governing authority in the wasteland. While this Enclave initially operated in the shadows, they would eventually deploy their iBots to spread propaganda across the wasteland, portraying themselves as saviors rebuilding America. Meanwhile, a power struggle was brewing behind the scenes between Colonel Autumn and President Eden. You see, Colonel Autumn wanted to establish the Enclave as a governing body over the people of the Wasteland, while Eden wanted to pursue the Enclave's original goal of genociding all mutants, just as they did back in Fallout 2. Autumn believed this plan was too extreme, and for a time, he convinced the president against carrying out a genocide. However, Eden would secretly bide his time, waiting for the right moment to betray Autumn and cull the herd. While the Enclave had attempted to rally the support of the people, they would ultimately fail, as the Brotherhood of Steel was proving to be the more preferable faction for the public, as they were actually helping the people of the Wasteland. Around the late 2250s, the Brotherhood of Steel, under Elder Owen Lyons, would take on Project Purity. The project, created by a man named James and his group of scientists, would attempt to build a large-scale water purifier inside the Jefferson Memorial, capable of providing clean water to the citizens of the Wasteland. Eventually though, by the year 2277, the project had been abandoned. However, during that same year, James's son, the Lone Wanderer, cleared the Jefferson Memorial of supermutants, rescued his father from Vault 112, and helped persuade the project's scientists to continue to work on it. This caught the attention of Colonel Autumn, who dispatched Enclave soldiers to take over the Jefferson Memorial by force. Autumn's plan was to activate the purifier while it was under their control, in order to deceive the people of the Wasteland into believing that the Enclave was responsible for Project Purity, granting them support and authority. Colonel Autumn would confront James and the other scientists working on Project Purity inside the activation chamber, and threaten to kill them all if they didn't activate the facility. James appeared as though he was going to comply with Autumn's demands, but instead, he triggered a disruption inside the chamber, which caused a massive radiation leak, killing almost everyone inside. While James would perish inside the chamber, Autumn managed to inject himself with a powerful anti-radiation agent and was able to just barely survive the attempt on his life. When he regained consciousness, Autumn would continue his plan to control the Wastelands. And while his scientists worked on activating the purifier, he appeared on Enclave radio, warning the people not to interfere with Enclave troops, threatening severe punishment for those who did. In addition, enforcement points were set up across the capital Wasteland to monitor traffic, conduct genetic screenings, and detain non-compliant individuals. Meanwhile, Enclave troops were sent to locations with large amounts of radiation in order to acquire samples and analyze local mutated wildlife. Enclave troops were also sent to Old Alney in order to capture Deathclaws to use as shock troops for their military. On top of all that, Autumn would prioritize tracking James's son, the Lone Wanderer, who he believed knew the code to activate the purifier. The Enclave would track the Lone Wanderer to Vault 87, which contained a Garden of Eden creation kit which was necessary to activate Project Purity. Enclave troops led by Colonel Autumn then infiltrated Vault 87, securing the Gek and capturing the Lone Wanderer. After being transported to Raven Rock for questioning, the Lone Wanderer was imprisoned and personally interrogated by Autumn, who demanded the code to activate the purifier. It was during this interrogation that Colonel Autumn was ordered by President Eden to handle other matters, and once Autumn left the cell, Eden would free the Lone Wanderer from captivity and summoned him to his office. After the Lone Wanderer escaped and Autumn discovered what Eden had done, he ordered his men to shoot on sight and disregard the president's orders. While the president was higher in the chain of command than the colonel, the soldiers were more loyal to Autumn and attempted to eliminate the Lone Wanderer before he could make it to Eden. After fighting through waves of Enclave troops, the Lone Wanderer would make it to the presidential office and discover Eden's true identity as a supercomputer. Eden would then make a proposition to the Lone Wanderer, and that was to infect Project Purity with a modified strand of FEV which would infect all mutated life in the capital Wasteland, just as the Enclave of old had planned to do all those years ago. While the player has the choice to take Eden's deal, in canon, the Lone Wanderer would decline his offer and escape the facility. And during the escape, Raven Rock, along with President Eden, would be destroyed, as the Lone Wanderer has the option to either convince Eden that his plan is fucking stupid and that he needs to activate the facility's self-destruct sequence, or steal the code from Colonel Autumn's quarters and trigger the explosion themselves. If neither happens, Liberty Prime eventually arrives at Raven Rock and destroys it after the main quest. During the Lone Wanderer's escape, Colonel Autumn would relocate to the Jefferson Memorial, However, before he could succeed in activating the Purifier, the Brotherhood of Steel would deploy Liberty Prime and launch an attack on the Jefferson Memorial in an attempt to seize Project Purity from the Enclave's control. Autumn underestimated the strength of the Brotherhood, and during the battle for Project Purity, the Enclave was overwhelmed as the Jefferson Memorial was seized by Lion's Pride with the help of Liberty Prime. Once inside, the Lone Wanderer would confront Colonel Autumn, and during this confrontation, Autumn is either killed in battle or persuaded to retreat by the player character. Regardless of Autumn's fate, the Purifier would be activated, securing the Brotherhood's victory and providing clean water to the people of the Capital Wasteland. 2 weeks later, the Brotherhood of Steel would launch a final attack on the Enclave, attempting to wipe them out once and for all. During this attack, the Brotherhood would redeploy Liberty Prime to finish them off, but they were led into a trap, as the Enclave would bombard Liberty Prime with an orbital strike, destroying him in the process. While this slowed down the Brotherhood, it ultimately proved futile, as the Lone Wanderer infiltrated the Enclave's mobile base crawler, sabotaging their orbital strikes, and redirecting the payload to devastate the Adams Air Force Base, wiping out all remaining Enclave forces and ending the war for the Capital Wasteland. The year is now 2281, and the Enclave's presence is now almost non-existent. Their bases in the Capital Wasteland were destroyed, Camp Navarro was seized by the NCR, and its surviving members were either in hiding or were being tried for war crimes. One squad managed to escape Camp Navarro before it was taken by the NCR, and fled to a vertibird refueling station near Mount Charleston. There, they retired their armor, set the station to standby, and dispersed to integrate into the population of the Mojave Wasteland. Depending on your choices in Fallout New Vegas, the remnants may reunite to fight during the Battle of Hoover Dam, or they'll meet their ends at the hands of the Courier. Meanwhile, in the Mojave Express building, there lies an Eyebot, designated ED-E. Eddie was the last surviving model of Duraframe Eyebots created at the Adams Air Force Base in the Capital Wasteland. Before the base was destroyed by the Brotherhood of Steel, Eddie's creator, Dr. Whitley, uploaded valuable Enclave data into the Eyebots database. He then sent Eddie on a cross-country journey to Camp Navarro, unaware that it had been lost to the NCR decades earlier. As his journey continued, eventually, Eddie reached the Mojave Wasteland, where he was shot twice by a raider with a sniper rifle. The damage caused him to deactivate near the town of Prim. Eventually, Eddie was found by a courier, who ended up leaving him at the Mojave Express building, where he lay awaiting someone to come along and repair him. By the year 2287, on Mount Desert Island, Maine, a lone Enclave survivor named Brian Richter lives among the ranks of the Children of Atom. Richter, who once fought under Colonel Autumn and President Eden, was on a long-term mission to recover a reserve of fusion cores back in 2277, when disaster struck. You see, the disposal facility they had tracked the cores to was still operational, and due to a mistake made by the team's engineer, the containment cellar's lead-wrapped steel door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Surviving on 2 sips of water and a bit of rat roach a day, Richter slowly watched his team die of starvation or dehydration. As he anticipated his demise, Richter was saved by a member of the Children of Atom named Zealot Tectus, who was able to break the seal on the door. After being nursed back to health by the Archimist, Richter attributed his survival to Atom's blessing and became a Grand Zealot of the Children of Atom. Meanwhile, in the former state of Massachusetts, remnants of the Enclave began to appear, setting up outposts around the Commonwealth. Led by Major Elias, their orders were to establish a field headquarters in the Glowing Sea, with their primary goal being the recovery of high-value Enclave technology, including the Hellfire power armor, XO2 power armor, and a Tesla cannon. Satellite encampments were established across the state of Massachusetts, as these Enclave soldiers believed that the Commonwealth had potential for a new base of operations. During these operations, the Enclave would gather intelligence via reconnaissance, coercion, torture, and any other methods they deemed necessary, viewing the general population as expendable, with standing orders to hunt down any witnesses. Other camps were also established for various specialized purposes, such as deploying Eyebots, collecting DNA samples, and conducting research on local flora. These Enclave remnants are part of the Creation Club quest, Echoes of the Past, so if you haven't played Fallout 4 in a while, this quest may be unfamiliar to you. However, with the latest next-gen update for Fallout 4, you can access this quest for free via the Creation Club. Despite constant setbacks and gradually fading into myth, the Enclave survived in isolated locations. And in Amazon's Fallout TV show, we are shown the Enclave research colony. To the naked eye, the colony appears to be a simple warehouse complex, but in reality, it is home to an underground subterranean facility controlled by the Enclave. By the year 2296, the Enclave used this facility primarily for experiments involving mutated biology, energy studies, and significantly, behavioral engineering, which utilized dogs bred solely for the purpose of their research. One of the Enclave scientists, a man named Wilzig, would grow attached to one of the dogs named CX-404 and secretly adopted her. It was around this time that Wilzig was contacted by Lee Moldaver, who wanted to use cold fusion to power the city of Los Angeles. If Wilzig could steal the cold fusion from the Enclave and escape their facility, Lee promised him safe passage to Los Angeles. After conducting a series of off-the-books experiments with the cold fusion, Wilzig injected it into his neck in order to keep it safe. However, his plan was foiled when another scientist discovered that Wilzig had been experimenting with cold fusion, as well as hiding a dog in his quarters. While Wilzig pleaded with his colleague, he would set off the facility's alarm and shoved Wilzig to the ground. CX-404 then came to the defense of her master and killed the scientist right then and there. Knowing that he would be executed for his defiance, Wilzig took CX-404 and fled the facility in a daring escape. Eventually, a reward was put out on anyone who could capture or kill Wilzig, prompting every bounty hunter in the area to go after him. Moldaver would arrange for Wilzig to be safely transported from Philly to the Griffith Observatory so he could activate the cold fusion. However, before he could, he had his leg shot off by the ghoul in a town shootout. With the help of a vault dweller named Lucy, he managed to escape the town before he could be captured. Knowing that his injury was hindering the delivery of the cold fusion, Wilzig chose to take a cyanide pill, ending his own life. Before passing away, Wilzig instructed Lucy to retrieve the cold fusion inside of his neck by decapitating him and delivering his head to Moldaver. This decision would allow Lucy to deliver the cold fusion without him holding her back. After he ultimately died, Lucy followed his instructions, decapitated him, and headed off into the wasteland. Heh, see what I did there? Once again, I'd like to thank War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play it for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox now by using my link in the description of this video. And don't forget, new and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across all platforms, including multiple premium vehicles, 100,000 silver lions, and other goodies, all available for a limited time only, so make sure not to miss it.